Hi, Anton.
Oh, good. Hello. How are
How are
you?
you?
We just
Yeah,
spoke. Oh, yeah.
yeah, good. So we decided that we were going to talk about anger today, didn't we, between us?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's going to be, we may do a series of these. So we thought that anger would be a good place to start. Just we're going to talk about what it is, just cover the theme of anger, how it can affect people. With it obviously specifically teenagers, young people, and then moving to, now that we understand what it is, or we've discussed what it is, how understanding it can then lead us to be free of it or perhaps even taming it. And yeah, just how it applies really in day to day life. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, what is when you hear the word anger? I mean, everyone knows what it is clearly, but what is your take on it and what does it mean to you and what do you think is behind it? Could you share a bit about that?
Yeah, so anger's quite an interesting one for me, really, because I grew up in a household where people just didn't really get angry. I mean, obviously, there was other ways that people dealt with their emotions, but anger just wasn't one of them. And what I found kind of as time went on and other people were angry sort of out of my house, because in my house people only got angry if there was something really, really, really wrong. It felt like if people were angry around me, I went straight into that kind of fight or flight because I thought, oh my God, there's an absolute disaster. So it wasn't really an emotion I'd got used to. And then later on, I mean, I met my husband when I was 15 and he's Italian. So you can kind of see
See where this is going?
I was around all this kind of emotion and shouting and, and
Yeah,
that's just their way. There was nothing kind of
the
wrong with
opposite.
it. But it
Mm,
really did. I did notice it put me properly into that fight or flight instantly. And it's kind of something I've had to get used to. And I suppose looking in this direction where we look at kind of where the experience comes from, it's taken on a new meaning, I suppose, because it is, it's an emotion that's allowed like all other emotions, isn't it? So it's been a good one. So I think this topic's great for today. I mean, what about you? What do you see around anger?
yeah, I like how you introduced that. It's nice to have the background. So, yeah, I mean, I think similar to you, I never grew up in an angry household. It would have been the exact same actually. It would have been the case that everything was more or less fine, and then if something came up and it resulted in people getting really angry, then that was like it signified something that was a serious issue, and it might actually live
Yeah,
on in your memory then a little bit as well. There weren't really many of those moments, but I can totally relate to that. That it brings like a kind of a certain weight, I suppose,
yeah,
where the emotion is tied to a particular event, a significant event, or disagreement, or difference in opinion, and it's very much the focus is on that issue or like that disagreement, the topic or the subject of the anger, as opposed to any kind of awareness around what anger actually is and what was actually happening in that moment,
yeah,
which is all fine. I mean, there was never any issues there. But yeah, like right now, I mean, I see it as when I see people getting angry, which isn't like I don't see it in my day to day life at all, really, thankfully. But it's more obviously more like on the news or in the media or what's happening in the world. Clearly,
mm,
I look at it and I just think if people understood what it was or had more of a comprehension of what's happening when they feel anger, then it would just be a completely different world altogether. And that's at the macro level of like, global events or stuff in the media or like Will Smith hitting Chris Rock, like if
yeah,
you I remember that when that came out, I remember Michael Lee had a post on it as well in the Three Principles. And
mm,
I was just talking about like if you could understand what was happening, if Will Smith could have understood what was happening in that moment, that might not have happened, and the
yeah,
environment following might not have happened. So yeah, the way I see it now is really that when someone feels anger, when we do or someone else, it's a buildup of energy, isn't it? That's what's really
yeah,
happening. And what happens is these days, I suppose, is what happens normally is that people don't they're not in touch with that understanding of what it is or what's happening in that moment. They're just going from 0 to 90 and it's very much that an external situation or stressor is causing that to happen. So something that someone said or something that someone did is making me feel that way. But I found it interesting that I always come back to, like, how could that actually be the case? Like, how what mechanism is in place there that would mean that something happening in the world can transfer a feeling to you? Just
Yeah.
like, what are the mechanics? Like, what? How could that even happen? So I think even just people exploring that for themselves, like just in their personal lives or just for themselves, and then obviously in a wider societal way, would would make a huge difference. So yeah, for me, it's like, you're feeling something that's coming up, and then it's the resisting it, and it's the pushing against it and saying it shouldn't be happening, and it's the the gap between how you feel things should be and how you perceive things to be is where anger comes in, and obviously things like stress as well, which is maybe for another day. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it all comes back to curiosity, doesn't it? It's really perhaps just people asking the question, being aware of what's happening when they feel anger, and is it really about what's happening on the outside? Like, is it really about what my kid said or did, or what they didn't do, or if they disobeyed me or whatever it is, or is it more about my processing of this energy? And that's not to say that it doesn't matter what people do in the world, and it's all about feelings and stuff. It's not going in that route, but it's just having that awareness. I think in that moment that can make all the difference. That
Mhm.
if you just catch yourself, or you kind of say, okay, and you just feel what's coming up and not react to it straight away. Just let the feeling be there for a moment and just be curious about it. And just doing that actually kind of diffuses it to an extent, I think, and it means that things are just clearer for you to deal with it then from a clearer space and a more calm space, and that can make all the difference then in family life, wider family, kids, friends, etc. So
Yeah.
that's how I see it now.
Because I think that kind of, the family environment is almost like the most perfect place to take a look at this, isn't it? Because
Mm,
we're with the same people all the time, yet we can have a completely different experience of what they're doing. One day your child is rude to you, and it's like, oh god, they miss, they're obviously in a bit of a bad mood. That's like, okay, we'll kind of let that go. And then there's another time when they do exactly the same thing, and you're like, whoosh, and you can't cope with it, and it feels so personal, and it feels disrespectful. And I think that's where the interest in kind of what's going on comes from, where, like, how can that be? How can you feel so differently in different times of the day, even where
yeah,
one minute doesn't affect you and another moment it does. And I think that kind of, like, even the way, like, the person who's saying, like, when you experience the anger, for example, my son might come up to me and say, well, what's wrong with you, why are you so angry? And I'm thinking, I'm not even angry, I don't know what he's on
yeah,
about, do you know what I mean? so
yeah.
so he's perceived my
Mm,
mood or something I've said in a way that's not actually true.
yeah,
But that's come from his own perception. So basically, you sort of, when you start really taking a look at this, it's like, well, I feel like I'm on a lose lose, because you can't control the other person, and you've got no control over your own perception either. So, but it's not even that, is it? It's where it's so open to change that you're
yeah,
never stuck in the same
yeah,
place or mood or how you see things. And I think that's the bit that gives you the freedom where, well, okay, well, that means I can have a different experience of it. And
yeah.
also it's okay to get angry, it's
Mm.
that's
It's
a
okay to feel that. Yeah,
normal emotion.
yeah. And people beat themselves up for feeling angry, don't they? Like after the fact, it's almost like you're judging yourself for, yeah, criticizing yourself for just having that emotion in the first place, which just
Yeah.
amplifies it. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's really interesting. It's like the common denominator is you, isn't it? It's like you're sort of like it's all revolving around you in the sense of like the different viewpoints or experiences you're having in as regards anger. Like I think as well, I think all kids go through, like, have the experience of feeling that their parent is angry with them, or even maybe not a parent, like a friend or somebody and they're thinking, oh, that person's angry with me, they haven't been in touch with me, or they didn't respond to my text, or their their reply was a bit short, or it seemed like that, and then you might say it to your parent or to your friend, are we okay? Are you angry with me over something, or is it because of what I said 2 weeks ago? And they're like, no,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
So it is, yeah, it's so common, so universal. Um, yeah, absolutely. So what would your advice be to, someone watching this who perhaps has a teenager or a child or someone in their family who gets angry on a regular basis or lashes out? Um, and I think typically the way people deal with it is that they naturally go to the situation. They go into the fixing mode,
Yeah.
and it's either into the fixing mode or trying to fix it, or actually more towards the person and saying, you always do this, or you have to do that, or this is happening because you do X, Y, Z, or so, which definitely isn't helpful. I think everyone knows that, like, because if people feel that they feel they're under attack, and they try to defend themselves, and that leads to other things. So, like, what would you say to someone who is trying to manage that on a regular basis? Um,
Yeah. So I think, it is down to understanding it, isn't it? Where like people don't even know kind of how humans have got to kind of lashing out, So basically at some point that person will have felt an emotion, felt the build up, lashed out slightly, and in that split second it did something for them. So it relieved
yeah,
something, they felt better. And then the mind's a machine, so then it latches onto that, takes in that data,
yeah,
and then the next time, again, it might just be quite small, but the mind, the buildup of energy would come again, and the mind gives them that data as, oh, well, when you lashed out last time, that helped. A bit like when someone takes a glass of wine or a cigarette, it's
yeah,
exactly the same. And then unfortunately, it builds into a habit where the mind is giving them that information each time. And the thing is, it's like if you talk to someone that lashes out as standard, they don't even have that thought before it. So it's so instant now. It's turned into a reaction that comes because it feels like it makes them feel better. And quite often, after the whole event's happened, they feel terrible, or and same with somebody that's created a habit of drinking or smoking, it does something to start with. Oh great, it relaxes me, it makes me feel better.
mm,
And then unfortunately it takes a life on of its own where it's just not fun anymore and it doesn't do anything, and then it affects other people. So I guess like stripping it down to kind of where it comes from is really helpful.
yeah,
um, and also I know it's really hard to get a teenager to look in this direction, but I think even if a parent learns it, then it's something. It's a bit like a tuning fork, isn't it? When you know it yourself,
yeah,
it kind of oozes out onto the people that are around you.
mm,
um, and I suppose that would probably be my advice, is to kind of start to explore this, like where it's starting from, what's going on, how their mind's working. And it's the same for adults. We're all human beings, so we all work the same. But I think with teenagers, it's all quite heightened, isn't it? Because they're
yeah.
a bit all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you try
Yeah,
to come in at it as like an intellectual explanation of how it works to them, then it's going to be like, oh, here we go again. It's going to
yeah,
take like 20 minutes to talk through this, and then it's just not really going to work because you're trying to appeal to their logic almost, or that's how they'll see it. But yeah, it's like that quote. It's probably like such a cliche, but like, be the change you want to see in the world, and like it's kind of it's a cliche, I suppose, because it's true, right? Because if somebody if your son or daughter, someone in your family sees how you are behaving, or how you're operating, I suppose, under certain circumstances,
yeah,
then naturally get curious about it. And really, we all feed off each other's energy. Like we do. Like it's you can tell them like how else could we tell that someone is angry if they're not exhibiting signs of anger? Because we can sense it. We can sense the energy. And I think that is spot on. Like so, it's really about embodying what you're what your viewpoint is, what your understanding of it really. So if
Yeah,
your child can sense that, oh, mom or dad seems really calm, and how could they be, because this is happening and this is what I did or didn't do, then they'll start to get curious about it. So yeah, and it takes the steam out of it, because it just, anger comes out of nowhere a lot of the time, right? It's not like it's a, sometimes it can be progressive, but it's just, a lot of the time it's just, as you say, it's someone lashing out because everyone's doing whatever they see is going to, whatever they believe is going to make them feel better. So you're doing it out of, like, just try to release steam, I guess, trying to vent. So if you see that someone else, so your parent isn't reacting in that way, it should cause you to get curious about why that is. And if
yeah,
that's happening all the time, it's like, okay, but just the fact that the calmer you are, the more that will transfer to your child. So
yeah, because I think that's right, is the like not personal side of it. And again, sometimes
yeah,
the content of what they say and do is very personal,
mm,
but it's looking at it from a zoomed out perspective where
yeah,
you can see why they're acting the way they are, but actually the content is kind of irrelevant. As you said, it's them trying to
yeah,
let off steam. It's not actually personal to us as parents,
yeah,
and we are the people that they probably feel that they can do that with and to. It doesn't feel great in the moment, but
mm,
it's not really anything to do with us.
yeah. That's it. And I can, my toddler is like, she's nearly 3, so, but as you were saying before the call, like, everyone acts in the same way. It works the same for everybody, right? So even at that young age, it's almost more like they don't like how they feel. So it's like it's a reaction to that. It's pushing against, I don't like this feeling. I want to feel a different way. And the way that happens is if this circumstance changes. So what we would always say is, it's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel
Yeah,
angry. And she would even say it back to us now. She'd be like, "Oh, mommy, daddy, it's okay to feel sad.
yeah,
It's okay." And we're like,
yeah,
"Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you got it."
yeah,
So
yeah,
I think that's the starting point for a lot of it, is actually, and that's what will diffuse it as
yeah,
well, is saying, okay, that's fine. It goes back to your calmness is going to transfer, and okay, that's fine. We feel angry. Let's talk about it. Sort of like that. So you're not just kind of bouncing back and forth, which just leads to it all escalating most of the time.
yeah. Because I think that when you do take it personally, it's
Mhm.
then at risk of then going into the next argument and the next argument, and then it builds into a bit of a problem, doesn't it? Where it's like, oh well, they're always angry at me and they're always disrespectful. I mean,
Yeah.
they're probably not, but it feels like that because it's
Mm.
become a very big sort of story, and it feels very big and heavy. And I think, what you said about talking to your daughter about it's okay to be angry and sad. I mean, that's literally the golden nugget, isn't it? Where
Yeah.
if everybody knew that it's okay, how many times do you go to the park and a child falls over and the adult's like, oh, don't cry, let's go and buy you some sweets to make you feel better.
Mm-hmm. That's that under the carpet.
Yeah,
Let's get you sorted. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So and that's learned from an early age, isn't it, that it's not okay to be
Yes.
sad or cross, or it's just, and even that's interesting, isn't it, that it's the same energy in our body, but we label it as all these different things. I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of a funny way of looking at it as well, isn't it?
Exactly. Like, if under other circumstances, it could be determination. Like, I'm determined to do that, and it's almost like that's almost like a positive channeling of, you see something that's not right or that you need to fix in your own life. Right, I'm going to do this. So if you're in a different space, you might see that as you being angry with yourself, or with somebody else. But it just depends on where you're at.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. I thought it was interesting you said as well about you said the venting, or the kind of the releasing of something. I read a book a while back. I probably mentioned it a couple of times, but it's called Letting Go, and it's by a guy called David R. Hawkins, and he's
right,
deceased now, but he wrote it. He wrote it actually on 2012, I think was the last update. But there's a section in it kind of early on. It's about the anatomy of emotions, and then he goes through
right.
all the different emotions. So it's kind of like anger, pride, jealousy, etc. And he does talk about it in those terms. It makes total sense. That it's really more just like a pressure cooker. Like, there's a build up of angry feelings inside you, literally, that have not been acknowledged, or have not been, yeah, not being allowed to just like breathe, I suppose. And then because you're bottling them up, or they're not being, they're being suppressed or repressed. Goes into detail on it, but ultimately it's just like something like a tinder box, or like a match that just sort of lets it lets it go, or just releases it, but obviously not in the way that you would want. So the way to sort of avoid that, I suppose, is to just acknowledge it, and to not resist it, not push against that feeling, but rather just let it be. And just in the letting be of it, just letting it be really kind of dissolves it, I guess, and it just clears everything up.
Yeah,
To
yeah.
an extent.
Yeah, because I suppose that lashing out, like if you again, if you kind of see it the same as somebody smoking or drinking, it's that way out, isn't it? That trying to get out of the feeling. So you get the build up, and then you're cutting it down at its knees every single time. So you're lashing out, and then you're back to balance for a minute, but then you cross with yourself. So you're never letting it do the full
Yeah,
cycle, come in, come out, and then go through the other side. And then that's resistance, isn't it, where
it
you're
is.
always pushing it back in and it's not allowed to do what it needs to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're trying to grapple with it in different ways. It just differs from moment to moment, or from scenario to scenario. Like sometimes it might be just brushing under the carpet and then start over the next day and try, but it's still kind of simmering the next day maybe.
Yeah,
Or um other times it might just be a full blown row, and it's kind of just, yeah, stagnating then, and not being kind of, as you say, fully released. Um yeah, so that's it really.
yeah.
Then how do you, like, in your own work, like, have you seen the benefits coming through from sharing this with people? Like, how do you see people um coming to realize this for themselves? Like, do you have anything to share on that? Like, any stories or things people have said?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have someone quite close to me that kind of had some coaching around this, and yeah, weirdly is not not weirdly. I mean, I completely know how it all works, so I knew that it would be helpful, but yeah, going from someone that was incredibly angry a lot of the time to and not even not angry, because again that's not the thing, is it? It's that kind of seeing anger in a totally different way, and I think
Yeah.
that would be more how it works than anything else. It's not that you're not going to be angry, and it's not that
Mm.
all this helps with anger to stop it, but it's seeing it in such a way that it doesn't get to the point of no return, where when people talk about the red mist, and where they
Yeah.
get so angry that they can't focus or concentrate, again because it's allowed to do what it needs to do, and that's perfectly normal and natural.
Yeah.
It does it in a very healthy, normal way. Well, not normal, I don't want to keep using the word normal,
Yeah,
but
but just, yeah,
that kind of how it's
natural, I
meant to.
suppose.
Yeah, it is. It's a
Mm.
totally natural thing to happen.
Mm.
But the other way, where you're so tight, well, what if I lose my temper? Or even like labeling yourself as somebody who has a temper,
Yeah.
it just feels wrong. It's made to feel so wrong. But sometimes we have a bit of a temper in a moment, and sometimes we don't. And again, I think
Mm.
it's that moving and changing, and knowing that nothing is set. So no person is an angry person. Babies are not born angry.
Yeah.
It's something that's learned over time. It's programmed into you as part of your conditioning because of what you've soaked up along the way.
Mm.
And then that's how you behave in the world. But it's not that you're an angry person. You have angry thinking. You've labeled your emotions as anger. And I was just thinking just now, actually, I quite often feel like I'm like what I would call overwhelmed, but it's the same, it's exactly the same sensation as what anger would be. It feels very tight and I need to get out of it. um, but that's just what it's been labeled as. But
Yeah.
interesting that I haven't labeled it as anger, even though it feels exactly the same.
Mm.
So I think
Yeah.
it's that knowing, isn't it, that nothing's stuck.
Yeah, that's it. And it's not seeing any emotion as a problem, right? Because, yeah, you're not labeling it as anger, or you probably don't even use, you probably don't say like I get overwhelmed easily or anything like that. It's more because you know that it's not a problem in the first place. So if no emotion is a problem, no feeling is an issue or a problem, there's nothing to really grapple with in the first place. There's nothing to push away or to resolve or to fix, because it's a normal human emotion, let's say, a natural human emotion. And if because it's an emotion, it's meant to be there, right? So like, why would it exist if we weren't meant to have that experience? So then that just leaves, okay, so if I'm going to have this experience from time to time, I can either say it's a problem and it needs to be dealt with, or I can just see it as something that comes up from time to time and I don't have to worry about it. And then by not worrying about it, it frees me up to just manage the practicalities, or to just explore what needs to be explored, or deal with what needs to be dealt with in the real world. Yeah, and then what you said with, like, I'm an angry person, or labeling yourself like that. I remember it was a podcast I was listening to. It was actually just about a guy talking about online marketing related topics. So nothing to do with this really, but he was saying, he just was talking about his personal life, and he was saying, oh yeah, I can get angry with a bit of a short fuse, and my dad was like that, and my brother's like that. He gets angry easily and all that. So it's almost like, well, that's going to fulfill itself, isn't it? If you kind of if you sort of label yourself that way, then you're probably going to act like that a lot. Go, yeah, see, there you go.
Absolutely.
And actually saw, like, earlier this morning, I saw a kind of a mini podcast on this morning radio show, and it was like a segment called Taming the Green Monster. And I was like, oh, I could, when we introduce this in the group, we can call it like Taming the Anger Monster or something like that. I was like, no, we're not going to call it that, because we're not looking to tame anything, we're just looking to understand it. Yeah. So, but it's interesting though, isn't it? And it's no surprise how people perceive this, because the media has a huge role to play there, because it's just a reflection of what people think, and society and culture, that it's like, here's a problem, an emotion that's a problem, and here's how you deal with it, and we get a psychologist on to talk about it and all that. Not that they might not have anything to beneficial to contribute, but it's just the language around it, isn't it? Taming this, taming that, and controlling, and when really there's, if we look in the opposite direction, it can just be a total game changer.
Yeah, and I think that kind of wanting out of a feeling as well, that's been told to us forever, and the people that were here before us and the people that were here before that, that's been message all the way along. And I don't think, obviously a few people have been onto this a while ago, but it's only sort of now, isn't it, that people are going, hang on a minute, why would we be given all these feelings, emotions, like, why would our body and mind be wrong? It's just not possible, is it? Why would we be born in the most miraculous way, and then there you go and suffer for the rest of your life? It just doesn't make sense.
No. And we don't question, like, things like, if people say, oh, learn how the heart works or the brain works, or like how blood moves around your body, like, oh yeah, that's how it works, that's interesting, we discovered that. Okay. No one's kind of questioning or like disputing it. It's just, that's how it works. But I think when it comes to this, to feelings, thoughts, etc., it's just totally, it's completely missed, isn't it?
Yeah, completely. And at a very basic level, it's trusting that that's doing what it's meant to do, the same as our heart and lungs, and the other things that are absolutely perfect.
Yeah, definitely.
But so I feel like we kind of have covered quite a lot there.
I think we have, for sure. So hopefully it's helpful to people, and if anyone has any questions, they can love to hear feedback. If people have feedback, just comment and let us know what you thought of it. We can do one maybe next month.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll think of another topic. We'll come up with another gem. But
gem.
Thanks, Anton. And
all right.
next time. Yeah, thank you.
Next time. Cheers, Claire. Bye-bye.